Hey guys, Bartel's Bookshelf here with another recent read video. As I mentioned in my previous video, this month the one reading event that I wanted to try to get to in some capacity was Tie-In Tember, which was created by It Came From the Page, and I learned of through Roy at Roy Reads Anything. The actual event has prompts to go with it. You know, read a book based on a movie that you enjoy, a movie that you don't enjoy, or a property that you don't enjoy. Read a book based off of a video game, that type of stuff. I didn't really stick to any of those. Because as I said again in my previous video, Aaron and I are going to be heading to England in under a week now. So I just haven't been able to focus on a lot of things. I'm probably going to be very busy. But I wanted to get something read for the event. And I ended up reading a few things that ended up fitting in with it accidentally. Again, some of which I talked about in my previous video with the Goosebumps comics. And along with this book that I'm about to talk about, I read another book that just so happened to fit into it that I didn't think about. But anyway, let's get started. So my main pick was the novelization of the film Return to Oz by Joan Vinge. Which Roy actually ended up reading too, totally coincidentally, which is funny. One of the reasons I wanted to do this event is because I have a ton of these novelizations just lying around. You know, not just tie-in fiction like with my Star Trek books. I really got into novelizations earlier this year, so I just have a bunch laying around, including this one, which I bought because I love the movie, and two, the fact that it was written by Joan Vinge was really intriguing because she's a Hugo Award winner for The Snow Queen and that kind of thing. Of course, I later found out, looking her up, that she wrote she has written a ton of novelizations as well, including Cowboys vs. Aliens and many others. As I said, I'm a big fan of the movie. I've watched it tons of times. It's very much in that sort of 80s dark fantasy mode of like The Dark Crystal or Labyrinth or that kind of thing. You know, it's that pre-CGI, all practical effects, and I love that. Also the fact that it's fucking terrifying, as a lot of people who know. And again, I love things that are terrifying. And I just love the audacity of the film. You know, it's mid-'80s. Disney is kind of at their lowest point financially. They're reaching into different, piles, trying to find something, that will stick, which is how we got, stuff like Watcher in the Woods and things like that. And so in the midst of their sort of financial desperation, they decide to spend $28 million on this dark, surreal, very idiosyncratic fantasy film, which in today's money, that's about $80 million, It was such a weird, crazy gamble, and, we're never going to get that kind of risk-taking again, I don't think, especially not from Disney. And also to make a film that's in a lot of ways, very faithful to the original Baum novels, which I'm also a fan of. It was actually this movie that got me more into the Baum novels when I found out how faithful this was. So yeah, if you know, you know. But it's a great movie, very dark, very imaginative. I rewatched it again after finishing the novelization, and I still love it. It has amazing special effects. The stop-motion effects from Will Vinton are incredible. It's just that sense of boundless creativity, unbeholden by logic. It's a type of fantasy that really speaks to me. So yeah, I love the movie. And the novelization was interesting. It's basically the movie. There's not a whole lot that's new or that's added, aside from being the nature of it being a novel. We get more into the characters' heads and what they're thinking and feeling and stuff like that. One of the things that really surprised me is that Dorothy doesn't even end up in Oz until about 50 pages into the book. In the film, it's only about 20 minutes, and it's a decently long movie. It's about an hour and 50. So the first 20 minutes, is in the real world. And but in the book, it just feels much more extensive and a lot less sketched out than the situation in the film does. Joan Vinge really goes into detail on Aunt Em and Uncle Henry's sort of emotional fallout from the tornado in the previous story, talking about Uncle Henry's sort of PTSD, and he's almost gone like catatonic and like receding into himself to the point where the new house they've been working on still isn't finished. Aunt Em is feeling like emotionally overwhelmed and exhausted from everything that's been going on. Having to support her husband and Dorothy, and worrying about Dorothy. And everybody thinks Dorothy is like crazy and having these delusional fantasies about this place called Oz, to the point where she gets taken to a freaking mental asylum that's like something out of Shock Corridor. It's really strong meat for a kids film, and for a novelization of a kids film, which is it's just one of the things that I find very fascinating about this and the film in particular, to go in such a dark direction. 50 some years after this, bright, colorful MGM classic. It's just so fascinating to me. And as I said, the fact that they spent so much money on it, it had this huge marketing push. There were novelizations, not just adult novelizations. There was a children's novelization, which Roy talked about. There's a big push. This even does the classic novelization thing of having, pictures in the middle. It was clear like they were sinking a lot of money into this, and I'm not surprised that it bombed. But the fact that that opportunity arose and it happened, like I'm just very grateful for that. But other than that, yeah, once she gets to Oz, it is pretty much a very straightforward retelling of the film. Although there were a couple details that were included in the novelization that I actually would have liked better if they were in the film. In the movie, you get the sense that they cut out a lot of character development and sort of interaction between characters. Things move at a very fast clip, and before one character is introduced, we're moving on to a different set piece and introducing another character before we really have time to learn about them. And one of the things that I always really liked about Baum's Oz books is that there's so much wordplay and dialogue and character interaction, which isn't something you would think you would find in a book like that. But like, for example, in the Land of Oz, you have the interactions with the Wogglebug and the rest of the band, where he keeps making puns and everybody hates it, to the point where the woodman threatens to chop his head off. You don't really get much of that in the film, but in the novelization, there's actually a little bit of like banter between Jack Pumpkinhead and Tick-Tock, where they're both kind of like vying for Dorothy's affections. They sort of argue to each other about who's kind of the superior being and who's a better who's a better helper to Dorothy and that kind of thing, which I thought was fun. It would have been nice to see more of that type of stuff in the film. But yeah, as I say, other than that, it is pretty faithful to the movie. And I wouldn't say it's essential, but it's very well written. Unsurprisingly for somebody who's a Hugo winner, but surprisingly for this type of novelization. In fact, there was one bit that I really liked that I wanted to share with you guys. Then, abruptly, an unseen disturbance somewhere in the clouds set the geese and ducks below to honking and fluttering in the shallows, as if a breath of strange magic had sent ripples through reality to disturb their resting place. After an endless moment of tingling otherness, the geese settled down again to their shoreline browsing. Time and the air seemed to slow and sigh as the riverbank returned to a normal, sunny autumn morning. There's just little turns of phrases like that you wouldn't expect out of a book like this that made it a very pleasant read. As I say, I wouldn't say it's essential, but if you're a fan of the movie, I think it's very entertaining, and it very lyrically brings across a lot of the ideas and the imagery from the film. So yeah, it was very enjoyable. I'm glad I read that. And then, as I say, we're heading off to England soon, and I have a few books that I have been kind of remained unfinished in my piles, because, I'm always in the middle of reading something, and sometimes I read straight through a book, sometimes it takes me a little while to remember to get back to it, and I figure since we're leaving soon, I don't want to leave all these books kind of sitting half-read for, 6 weeks, so I wanted to finish some of them off. And as I started rereading this one, I realized, this technically fits into Tie-In Tember as well. That is Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Section 31, Abyss by David Weddle and Jeffrey Lang. I started this back whenever I finished the Garrick novel, so around like maybe February or April, somewhere around there. It was when I was still in Foster City. And as time went on and I got deeper and deeper into this slump and I wasn't reading as much and getting distracted by other things, this kind of just fell by the wayside. But as I say, with the trip coming up, I wanted to finish some of these things that I was already in the middle of. So I decided to finally finish this one off. And I'm glad I did. It was really entertaining. Not as good as the Garrick book, but you can't expect tie-in fiction to reach that level of quality consistently. But this was still very solid. It felt like a very solid episode of the TV show. You know, nothing earth-shattering or amazing, but it moved at a fast clip and it was entertaining. This obviously deals with Section 31, who's, you know, the covert ops segment of Starfleet intelligence that even, you know, most of Starfleet doesn't know about. This is part of the relaunch series, so it picks up only a few weeks after the Avatar duology, when the station is kind of being repaired after having a bunch of its cores destroyed, and they're salvaging parts from the nearby Empok Nor station, which has been abandoned to, you know, supplement their repairs. And Bashir gets involved with a case for Section 31, where they want Dr. Bashir to go after this megalomaniacal doctor named Ethan Lockin, who's also genetically enhanced like him. And along the way, he discovers sort of Lockin's plan to kind of become the new Khan by gestating and raising his own army of Jem'Hadar in the wake of the end of the Dominion War. Yeah, this was really entertaining. It basically, as I said, it basically felt like a really solid episode of the show, which makes sense because the story was created by Weddle, who worked on the show. He was actually the creator of Section 31. He wrote the Inquisition episode where they first appeared. And it moves like an episode of the show. It's a very fast clip. You can kind of feel it broken into multiple acts, you know. It's very pacey. It's very entertaining. The character work is really solid. It's essentially kind of a more serious version of the James Bond parody episodes of Deep Space Nine, you know, where Bashir is, you know, playing with his like spy holo program and stuff. Yeah, it's essentially a serious version of that, which is a lot of fun. This continues developing some of the characters that have been introduced in the relaunch series, such as Elias Vaughn, who's, you know, the 100-plus-year-old new commander of DS9. Ro Laren pops back up, and she ends up involved in the mission. Chirisar Tithane, or however you pronounce his name, the Andorian science officer, you know, he's there as well. But the main sort of new character that's been introduced here that gets a lot of development that I really enjoyed was Tyranitar, who's this Jem'Hadar who isn't dependent on Ketracel White and was sent to the station by Odo to kind of be an ambassador between the Dominion and the Federation and to kind of observe and see how, you know, the other side does things. And he's really, really fun. You can tell the author had a lot of fun writing him. He gets a lot of the best lines. He has this very Worf-like sort of sternness to him and this very blunt way of speaking. He almost has the vibe of like an old samurai, you know, who's kind of intensely devoted to his master, and he's always going on about dying honorably and like the thrill of battle and stuff like that. And he's really fun. He's a badass. There's a bit where they're on this planet where Ethan Lockin is hiding out, and he takes out like 13 Jem'Hadar like in one fell swoop. And he's like fucking armed to the teeth. He's got like knives and grenades and plasma rifles, and you know, like he's just real stern and tough and cool. You know, I really liked him. And there's just really fun moments where his bluntness and everyone's sort of reaction to that around him, you know, leads to a lot of humor. Again, there was one bit that I really liked. Bashir, Ezri, and Ro had assembled in the airlock outside Runabout Pad C. It was, Bashir noted, only a little more than 8 hours since he and Ezri had told the Wayfarer to leave for Earth without them. Tyranitar arrived last, carrying only a soft-sided case of suspicious proportions. "Let me guess," Ro said. "Weapons?" Tyranitar didn't reply, but only laid the pack down on the deck, unfastened a pair of clips, then unrolled it like a sleeping bag. It contained a standard-issue Bajoran hand phaser with several replacement power packs affixed, what looked like a dozen or so photon grenades, and a sheathed weapon that Bashir guessed was a Kartakan. "What, no throwing knives?" Ro asked. Tyranitar indicated a small satchel bound into the case's lining. "Oh, good. Don't want to forget those." So yeah, there's just stuff like that. It's just really entertaining. You know, it's that classic sort of, you know, Trekkian, you know, banter, especially with Deep Space Nine, you know, or just, you really get the sense that this place is lived in and the characters know each other well, and it's just so much fun. And it's also really interesting to have a very good, honorable Jem'Hadar, similar to some of the ones we saw in the series, but to have one that gets more developed, you know, as a character. In fact, it's implied that he has a handle on computer programming, because Kira finds him in a holosuite doing this battle simulation where he's fighting this giant scorpion-looking monster, and she asks him, "Hey, where did you get this holo program from?" And he says, "Oh, I programmed it myself." So there's these indications that the Jem'Hadar have hidden depths that we haven't really had an opportunity to learn about, because previously they were just the aggressors on the other side of a war. So yeah, that part was a lot of fun. Ethan Lockin as a villain is just okay. He's a little bit stereotypical megalomaniac. He doesn't go on crazy maniacal rants or anything like that. He's a lot more subdued and even like sympathetic in a lot of ways, which I liked. I just didn't necessarily feel that he came together well enough to really come alive for me. And obviously there's this whole thing where he's trying to tempt Bashir to join him, and obviously we know Bashir's not going to join him. They do kind of play around with him being sort of like, or at least thinking about the things that Lockin is saying, but not really engaging with them. Although there is some interesting stuff, on the perspective of Bashir about, growing up genetically enhanced, having to hide it from everyone, having to feeling different and estranged, living essentially as a crime, because at this point genetic engineering has been outlawed by the Federation for centuries. So, I mean, it's not bad, but it's not the best part of the book, in my opinion. Although the actual siege on the planet and stuff, and the way that their whole plan is calculated is a lot of fun. And they meet these new interesting aliens called the Ingavi, which are like these bipedal sort of ape-like things, sapient, who were oppressed by the Cardassians, when the Cardassians ruled that area. And then, the Lockin and the Jem'Hadar came in and destroyed them further. So they're kind of a very mistrustful, sort of struggling race. But, they're very noble and they're very interesting. The main Ingavi who helps out Ro and Tyranitar is named Kel, and he's a lot of fun. And as well, this also continues on the legacy of Deep Space Nine being very dark, much darker than your average Trek episode or show. There's a scene where Kel takes Ro and Tyranitar to this outcropping, this glade that used to be this sort of holy place for the Ingavi, and he says, nobody goes in there anymore, and she doesn't understand why until she goes and she sees on the trees there's bones of dozens, maybe hundreds of Ingavi that have been nailed to the trees, including the bones of children. And when she asks him about it, Kel tells her Lockin used to tell the Jem'Hadar to nail the bodies up there, and he would just sit there and watch them. It's just so dark and fucked up, just sitting there and watching them as they slowly die. It's horrible, and it just really goes to show just how twisted this guy is. And yeah, that really surprised me. That little bit of gruesomeness, So yeah, overall, this was a lot of fun. It doesn't really further the plot of the relaunch novels in any way, but that's okay. It doesn't have to. I love a good filler episode as long as it's fun. And yeah, this was entertaining. I hope we get to see Bashir go on more sort of spy-centric adventures, and dealing with Section 31 and stuff like that. That'd be a lot of fun. And I want to learn more about Vaughn. They introduce a lot of stuff about him in this book, and he's very mysterious, and I really want to see where he goes. But we'll see whenever I get to the next one. It might be a while, but I have a list going of all of the relaunch novels so I can read them in order. So yeah, that was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed that, and that was a nice sort of accidental tie-in to Tie-In Tember. So yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Roy, for bringing this to my attention, and for coincidentally reading the same book as me. I love this sort of stuff. I love tie-in novels. I love novelization. So anything that gets me off my ass and reading more of this stuff is a good time. So yeah, and as I say, Aaron and I are going to be heading to England at the time I'm filming this in about 6 days, 6 or 7 days. So I'm going to be very busy, probably not going to be posting a lot of videos. I've been thinking about trying to post my regular sort of reading update videos, if I can, but my main thing, aside from all of the stuff that we're going to, general vacation stuff and the personal affairs that we're taking care of over there, my big project is I want to try and film a really big vlog of just everything that we end up doing there, and then when I come back, editing it into one big mega vlog and uploading that. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be taking up my time, so if I'm quiet for the next 6 weeks, I apologize, but thank you all for supporting me. I'm right on the cusp of 600 subscribers, so thank you guys. I really appreciate that. I mean, I didn't expect my videos of me just babbling out into the wasteland to mean anything to anybody, but like I said, I've almost hit 600 subs, and I've gotten some really nice comments and some wonderful support from people that have just been so nice to me, and that means everything in the world, especially online, which is just so filled with hatred and vitriol. So yeah, thank you all so much. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you guys next time, either in England or when I get back home. So yeah, until next time, see you guys later. Bye.